All right, guys, so we got to talk about a young scholar that unfortunately, tragically, received a Darwin Award for attempting to carjack a federal security officer who was off duty and waiting for his shift to start. Now, this teenager from Washington, D.C., a 13-year-old by the name of Vernard Toney Jr., again, was unfortunately smoked by this off-duty police officer after him and a friend tried to carjack his vehicle. Now, nobody should be surprised to hear that this teenager lived a life of crime and had a history of carjacking. And stories like this, they only seem to happen in these liberal cities like Washington, D.C., where crime has gotten out of control because they've gone soft on crime. So I want to talk about this unfortunate story, okay, for this teenager, and then I want to get into it. So without further ado, roll the clip.
News 4 is uncovering new details tonight about the middle school student, just 13 years old, shot and killed this weekend while trying to carjack an off-duty federal security officer. Today, the child's middle school principal described Vernard Toney as smart, funny, and talented. But we also learned he is no stranger to police. This Saturday was not the first time he was accused of stealing cars. News 4's Darcy Spencer has the new developments.
It was here on D Street Northwest, outside an office building, that 13-year-old Vernard Toney Jr. was shot and killed when he allegedly tried to carjack an off-duty federal security officer. It was around 10 Saturday night. Police say the officer was sitting in his car waiting for a shift to start when two juveniles told him to get out. According to the report, one of the teens had his hand in his front waistband pocket as if he had a handgun. And as he was complying, the officer pulled a gun and shot Toney in the chest. A second juvenile ran away. The off-duty officer's gun was the only one recovered from the scene.
Guns, carjackings, 13-year-olds, recipe for tragedy.
Two sources familiar with the investigation confirmed that Toney was arrested last May for a carjacking and robbery spree. This map shows the area where he allegedly committed 9 crimes in a 6-week period. News 4 reported he was 12 years old at the time. It's unclear what happened with those cases and why Toney was back on the street. In a one-on-one interview, Chief Pamela Smith told News 4 she wanted to be sensitive to the teen's parents and classmates.
He was known to the Metropolitan Police Department, and it's just unfortunate that this particular incident happened on Saturday night.
Toney was a 7th grader at Kelly Miller Middle School in Northeast D.C. We could see police presence at the school today. Counseling services were also being offered to students. The school principal sent a letter to parents saying Toney was a smart and talented student. He had a natural comedic ability and loved to make people laugh, especially when he would joke that he was the principal of Kelly Miller Middle. Vernard also loved to play basketball and spend his free time on the court with his friends. D.C.'s crime crisis was the subject of a council committee meeting earlier in the day. Leaders, community members, and victim families discussing violence reduction programs.
Everywhere I go, I hear people say that crime is the worst that they have seen, and it is driving our long-term residents out of the city.
According to D.C. crime stats, there have been 827 carjackings in the district so far this year. 74% of them involve guns, and most of those arrested are under 18.
And it's not all of our juveniles. I know we believe that there's a small number of juveniles. I believe, and I want to believe, and I'll go publicly and say the majority of our young people here in the District of Columbia are amazing young people.
Police tell us that off-duty security officer has cooperated in the investigation. At this point, no charges have been filed. In Northwest, Darcy Spencer, News 4.
Yeah, so, I really feel bad for this officer because he had no clue that this kid trying to play gangster bought a finger to a gunfight, right? And the officer, because it seemed like he was under threat of losing his life because, again, you got a child pretending that he has a gun while trying to play gangster, thinking that this is, Grand Theft Auto or something and trying to carjack the officer. He had no clue that the kid wasn't actually armed, right? But he didn't know that. And he did what he had to do to protect his life. Now, again, if you listen to the news, once again, they're trying to make a criminal, right? Because that's what he was, right? I mean, again, it sounds harsh to say because we're talking about a 13-year-old, but I mean, when this 13-year-old was involved in 9+ carjackings, armed robberies as well too. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how else to describe this individual, right? Outside of a criminal. And living a criminal thug life led to his death. That's just the reality, okay? And that's why, for me personally, these stories they're difficult to talk about because you got to be stern when it comes to stuff, right? Like I want to feel bad for the child, but I only can feel bad in the sense that I feel bad that I feel like the child never had a chance coming out the womb. Because a child that would engage in numerous carjackings was failed by his parents, right? Living a life of crime. He was failed by his parents. He was failed by his community. And, of course, again, you got the school trying to make it seem like, oh, well, he was a good kid. He was a great kid. He was a great kid. But this great, smart kid apparently wasn't too smart, right? Because he ended up losing his life trying to play gangster, right? Not fully thinking about the consequences of his actions. But again, this is what happens when you don't have a father in the home, which if I was a betting man, I would guarantee that this young child doesn't have a father in the home because this is fatherless behavior, right? This is what these kids engage in when they don't have fathers, when they don't have a man in the house to discipline them from a young age and to teach them how to be upstanding, law-abiding citizens. They end up turning to a life of crime. This is why in situations like this, you never see the father. It's always a single mother, which I'm sure is the case in this story. And then you have DC being soft on crime. He's committing all these acts of violence, carjacking, armed robberies, clearly showing a pattern of behavior that, hey, this guy can't function in regular normal society. We need to kind of get this kid off the street. We need some intervention here. Known to police. Didn't do anything about it. Didn't do anything about it. Now the kid is dead. He's lost his life. So again, for me personally, it's one of these things where, at the end of the day, people have to be shown that a life of crime does not lead to a good place, especially children. They're influenced by this thug culture, this rap culture, where you have little kids out here talking about gangbanging, shooting people, robbing, killing. And they're being influenced by this stuff. They're being brainwashed into thinking that, hey, this is a good life. This is what I should be doing. When, again, all that life leads to is death and destruction or jail. And unfortunately, that's what happened here. I think more so than anything, I think the officer that ended up shooting the kid probably feels terrible about it. And he needs all the support that he can get because who knows, these liberals might turn around and try to blame him. Okay, they might try to demand that he face charges because a young black teenager was killed, especially if the officer's white, okay? I mean, if the officer's black, they might let it slide and say, oh, well, this is just black on black crime. Let's just ignore it, right? Even though it's not really a crime, but, it's, any type of, incident that's black on black, they don't really want to talk about. They sweep it on the rug. So, that could be the case here, okay? But you notice how, they low-key are trying to blame guns. Well, the guns. It's like, well, it's not the gun. It's not the gun. How can you blame guns when the police officer, who, again, has the right to carry a gun in virtue of being a police officer or a security officer, he had to use his weapon because the teenager was pretending to have a gun, right? So it's not even like the teenager had a gun. The person that was supposed to have a gun had the gun, right? And he used it to defend his life. So again, this has nothing to do with guns, and more so that it has to do with these teenagers living a life of criminality, okay? And this is an epidemic in this country. I've done so many stories about these teenagers that are out of control. They are menaces to society, agents of chaos. They are destroying communities. And what happens is that, unfortunately, these teenagers either lose their lives at the hands of other, gangs and other criminals, or police get them, or they end up in jail. Or, sometimes also law-abiding citizens as well, too, end up killing them as well, too. But I'm just saying, that's what happens. And it's going to continue to happen if we don't address the cultural rot in this country that is leading to these kids living a life of crime, because that's what's happening here. This kid embraced a culture of violence and crime. And he would have kept doing that, probably ended up in jail, or, something like this probably would have happened. If again, this would not have happened. Regardless, he was going down the wrong path, and clearly his parents wasn't trying to fix it. And the authorities, the people running D.C., they weren't trying to fix it either. So, I mean, hey, it's a situation that, I think that, the officer that shot the child, I think it definitely probably is bothering him a lot. But, hey, at the end of the day, he had to do what he had to do to protect his life. A lot of people are not going to like it. They're going to say, oh, well, you're not, thinking enough about the child. But again, it's hard for me to feel bad when you have these kids trying to play adult, right? When you want to play adult, you win adult prizes. And this is what happens to adult criminals when they live this life. So, like I said, man, the real message here should be, hey, kids, you shouldn't live a life of crime if you don't want to end up like this, right? If you want to go on and have a prosperous life and to, raise a family and, do normal things, then you shouldn't live this type of life. This is where it leads to. That should be the message here. Not demonizing police, not demonizing guns, not trying to sugarcoat and make it seem like the kid, like, he was a great kid. Nah, don't sugarcoat it. Call it what it is. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.